never get back. But one Omaha woman was determined not to let a stroke define who she was. Instead, it became a way for her to make the heartland proud. 4 years ago, Lenice Hogan was focusing on being a mom, taking a break with some TV after putting her infant son to bed.
I started to turn the TV off and I fell flat on my face, and my legs just would not move.
She was sure it would start working again. Must just really be asleep, she thought. But after falling to the floor, after calling her husband into the room, her confusion quickly became panic.
But I immediately knew that I needed to be seen and went to the hospital that night.
But even 5 days later, Lenice still didn't have any answers.
I saw a different neurologist every day, and every one of them had a different opinion.
Different opinions, different diagnoses.
It was a stroke, it wasn't a stroke, it was a migraine, it wasn't a migraine, and it was just very confusing.
It wasn't until she was referred to Dr. Pierre Fayette at the Nebraska Medical Center that she definitively learned.
I learned that 39-year-old women can have strokes.
A stroke at 39 years old.
I exercised, I ate healthy, I never smoked a cigarette in my life. I'm doing everything right. How does this happen?
Your first reaction is, it's impossible. The stroke can't happen to me. This must be something else.
But Dr. Fayette knows better than most. It doesn't have to be something else. A third of all strokes happen to people before they're 50. And as the director of the Nebraska Medical Center's Stroke Center, the only stroke center in Omaha, Fayette and his colleagues have the time, know-how, and resources to definitively diagnose unusual cases like Lenice's.
The key is the interest and expertise in trying to find an answer to these questions.
Dr. Fayette is just, he's been my savior, my peace of mind in so many ways.
And 4 months ago, Lenice had an epiphany of sorts. While running on a sandy beach in Florida to strengthen a foot weakened by her stroke, she met a fellow stroke victim much worse off than she was. She decided running on the beach would just be the beginning.
Here I've been running for 3 days, about a mile on the beach, and now 2 months later, last week I did an 18-mile run, and I'm pretty confident I'm gonna finish that race.
That race is the New York City Marathon. She had always wanted to volunteer time to raise money for stroke awareness, and this, she says, is her chance. She is training to raise $10,000. A woman who has never run a marathon in her life. She started training a few months ago, now learning exactly what she and other stroke victims are capable of.
It's amazing. I sold myself short. I'm so much stronger than what I gave myself credit for after the stroke happened. I made concessions for, well, my leg's just never going to be quite the way that it was. This marathon has shown me that within all of us, and especially with God's help, that He gives us the power to do what we need to do.
That's what we need, more examples like her. Instead of taking that as a negative, that I had a stroke at 36, how could it happen to me? Rather turn it around and say, well, what can I do about it to help others? And that's the bottom line.
It's a privilege. That's how I feel. It's a privilege that I'm still able to perform in this way. I have a lot of angels.
And Dr. Fayette says that statistics show getting to a stroke center quickly can be extremely beneficial for a stroke victim. And he says people who have diabetes, high cholesterol, heart disease, or hypertension need to know the signs. We're talking about things like sudden weakness or numbness on one side of the body, sudden loss of vision, loss of speech or ability to understand it, slurred speech, loss of balance, or the worst headache of your life. If you'd like to donate to Lenice's cause, log on to firstgiving.com/Lenice Hogan. And if you know someone making the Heartland proud, give me a call at 554-4282 You can also send me an email to twilson@kptm.com.
Would you please help me welcome Lenice Hogan?
I'm thankful to be here today and talk to you a little bit about my story. Please don't hesitate to ask questions along the way. There isn't anything that you can't ask or that I won't talk about as I go through. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my background. I think the video, Taylor Wilson, who now works here, he was working for Fox at the time, he made me look really good, and I thank him for that. But that was almost 4 years ago. I actually did finish that marathon and have lived there since then. So, so please ask questions. I don't want to go too deep into the strokes and that kind of stuff. For me, the most important part is living day to day and moving on and going forward. But I'll give you a little bit of background on where I was, because it does have an impact on why I do what I do. I had my first stroke when I was 26 years old. I didn't know it was a stroke. I instantly felt like my brain was disconnected from the rest of my body. If your brain is a light bulb and your spine is the socket, it just felt like the light bulb was barely screwed in. It was super difficult to make sense of much of anything. I had troubles putting words together, sentence together, thoughts. I'd walk into a room and stand there and go, what the heck am I here for? I still do that. I don't know how this does, but it was that times 1,000. It's really hard to explain. I knew something was wrong because it was like flipping a switch. Went to see my physician. They did tests. They thought I had MS. They were not really sure what happened. They even sent me to Mayo Clinic. Mayo Clinic sent me home and said I had fibromyalgia. About 6-8 months, the symptoms started to subside. I went on with my life. Had kind of weird things that would happen occasionally over the next 13 years. My second stroke happened when I was pregnant with my youngest son. I was 7 months pregnant, and again, very similar. It was just instantly that switch flip, and I couldn't think straight. Well, now I'm pregnant. I have this little baby growing inside me. I'm like, oh my God, you know, what's happening? They put me in the hospital. Of course, I was very worried about him. They were more limited on what tests they could do at the time. And so, again, when they admitted me to the hospital, and the neurologist that saw me, and it wasn't this hospital, okay? They put me in the hospital, and this neurologist walked in. And literally, and I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he examined me for 2 minutes. I think it was more like 30 seconds. And he looked at me in the face and said, "You are an overstressed housewife. There is nothing wrong with you. I'm going to do these tests on you, but we are not going to find anything. You need to talk to a psychiatrist and go home." Okay? So he did the test, and true to his word, he found nothing. He came back and said, "There is not a thing wrong with you. Go home and speak to somebody. You're just overstressed." Well, it gets difficult, and I'm like, really, is it me? What's going on? I learned that I had a stroke because I happened to have a neighbor who was a radiologist at that hospital. He saw my name, looked at my films, called me and said, "Lenice, I'm so sorry to hear you had a stroke." I went, what? What? I had a stroke? That led to doctor after doctor trying to figure out what exactly had happened. My baby was delivered healthy and fine, and they started doing testing after that was done. One of the most common causes of stroke in younger people is a hole in the heart. So they said, let's look and see if you have that. I did. I had that hole in the heart repaired. And 2 months later, I had my third stroke. And that one was the big one. That one, to me, really was when I was finally diagnosed with what the problem was and what was going on. So it's still really unclear as to what was happening. And with that one, I I think as they mentioned, I had been watching Letterman. I had put my youngest son to bed, fed him. I had a nice little rocking chair and TV in his room, so I was feeding him, nursing, and put him to bed, sat down, I was watching the end of Letterman, and when I got up to go back to bed, I fell flat on my face. I couldn't walk. It's not that I couldn't feel my leg, I couldn't move it at all. And I remember sitting there on the floor thinking, okay, you know how when you take your car to the mechanic because it's making that crazy noise and you get there and now it's not making that crazy noise anymore and as soon as you leave it starts again? Well, I had this weird thought in my head that was like, if I call to my husband, it will fix it, you know, my leg will start working again. So I was sitting on the floor, every single muscle in my body I was squeezing, trying to get my leg to move. There's just absolutely nothing there. I couldn't make it move at all. So finally I sat there rubbing it, thinking it's gone to sleep, it's going to be okay. It wasn't. I started yelling at my ex-husband to come. And he had already gone to bed, and I finally woke him up, and he comes upstairs, he's like, what? What do you want? I went, my leg won't work. Very calmly, he said, what? I went, my leg won't work! It got me to the hospital. I just hit you. I start freaking out. So of course he started freaking out. He called my mom. My mom came. They rushed me to the hospital, and this was not this hospital again. Okay. When I got to the emergency room, they did a CAT scan. The CAT scan missed the bleed that had happened in my brain, and the emergency room doctor called and consulted the neurologist. The neurologist over the phone made the decision that he should give me TPA. Is everyone familiar with what TPA is? Do I need to explain that? No? Okay. So he was told to give me TPA, which had he done that with a bleed, Lord only knows if I'd be standing here today and in what condition I would. He didn't do that, and God only knows why he decided to tell me that he wasn't going to do that. I thought that was kind of crazy looking back now, but he sat there and he said, you know, I'm just not convinced that this is what you need, so I'm not going to do that. We're going to admit you. Thank God he did that. And I went there, I saw every single day a different neurologist who had a different opinion of what was going on. And I left the hospital a week later and went in unable to walk. Which is really, it was a crazy kind of, your foot won't work. You know, when your arm goes to sleep, that's the closest thing that I can give you to understanding what it felt like, but your muscles still have shape. Your brain's still firing and telling it what to do. You just can't move it. It's very, very heavy. It was kind of like that, except when I would put my foot on the ground, my foot would just flop from side to side because my brain wasn't even telling my foot what shape a foot should be in. So that it was just a wet noodle. There was just absolutely nothing there. But I was very, very lucky because I started getting muscle movement back pretty quickly. In fact, by, I think it was about 5:30 the next morning, I was able to make my big toe twitch like that. And I went, oh, thank God, you know, if it's moving that much, then it's going to come. It's going to come back, and it'll be okay. And so I left the hospital, able to walk. It was ugly. It was not a pretty walk at all, but I was walking, and I felt great about that. I spent the next month, I left that hospital unclear again as to what had happened, and had been recommended to go back to Mayo Clinic. And fortunately, a friend of a friend recommended that I see a neurologist here at the Med Center. I ended up seeing Dr. Fayed, and thank God he has been an angel in my life. And he spent about 3 weeks researching, going through my files. Were about this thick. Poor guy, I had to put him to sleep, I'm sure. And ultimately what he found is that I have a blood vessel in my head that is malformed. It's called a venous angioma, which basically it's a large blood vessel that a bunch of tiny blood vessels flow into. And it's at that point that it's bled 3 times. We don't know why, what has triggered it to bleed. So therefore, I don't really know what I can do to prevent it. I do think I'm careful about, I'm supposed to wear a helmet if I'm going to do anything where I could hit my head, or you know, just kind of be cautious. I take a baby aspirin every day, but outside of that, there's nothing I can do to fix it or prevent it. So now I'm a mother of 3 sons, and I've just found out that I've had 3 strokes with this, basically feels like a time bomb kind of in my head, like, you know, will it explode again? The odds are decent that will happen, and how do I deal with that? I spent the first 2 years in denial that it ever happened. I didn't want to say the word stroke. I didn't talk about it. I didn't think about it outside of the fact that I was determined to get my leg working again. I needed to be mom. So I did go to rehab, and it took about 6 months before I got to the point where you really couldn't tell when I walked that I had had a stroke. So I was very thankful at that point, and just kind of fell into this. When I look back now, what I know is that I was in the state of denial and the grief process. I just didn't want to deal with it. One of the unfortunate side effects of my stroke is that I didn't know I was in the grief process. My husband didn't either. And not that my stroke was, the only factor that ended my marriage, but it was a piece of it. It was hard. For me, it was hard on him. It had changed our lives dramatically in a lot of ways, and it was just more than he could take. My marriage ended partly as a result of that. So now I'm a divorced mother of 3 kids who's had 3 strokes, and I know, what do I do? At some point, I had, during the divorce, I'd been doing a lot of just taking care of the kids and I and trying to get us through, but I had done a lot of volunteering with the school and stuff before that, and decided that maybe I should do something with stroke afterwards. It was just the beginning of me starting to come out and accept that this had happened to me. And literally the day our divorce trial had ended, the day after that, I got on a plane with my kids, went to Florida, and that is really the start of where my healing process began, and the running part of it for me. I had given up. I wasn't exercising. I needed a handrail to get up and down steps. Even though I didn't walk with a limp, my foot is, and still is, significantly weaker than my right side. So I didn't stand, like now I stand with my weight on my right leg because it's the strong one, and so it affected every minute of my life. Anyway, we get to Florida, and for whatever reason, I decided that I was going to walk on the beach. That the sand is really good rehab for those muscles in your feet when you walk barefoot. So I thought, I'll get up every day. My kids are old enough now that I can sneak out before they wake up and get a little bit of exercise, enjoy the sunshine. Well, I get down to the beach and I went for a run. Like, I haven't done this for years. That felt really good. Any one of you could have walked beside me and beat me. It was not fast whatsoever, but I felt so good about it. I was really encouraged, so I did it the next morning. And then I did it the next morning. 3 days, I'm running, I'm feeling great about myself. And that afternoon of the 3rd day, I sat down by the pool with my kids. We were having a great vacation. And into the pool area walks a gentleman who was probably in his late 50s. It was obvious to me that he had had a stroke. He needed assistance to get into the pool area, to sit down. He had a brace on his foot. He had no use of the arm on the same side. So I went over to talk to him. And I said, what did you do to yourself? And he goes, I had a stroke, which I expected him to say. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that. I had a stroke too. Mine was about 4 years at that point. And he said, he got very quiet, and he just looked at me, and I will never ever forget that look, because it really did change my life. And when he finally spoke, he goes, "You have no idea how lucky you are." He goes, "My stroke was 7 years ago, and here's this poor man who, was certainly had so much more of life to live, and was unable to walk and move, and I still get goosebumps when I think about him." And that conversation that I had with him changed my life that day, because I just felt so much empathy for him. I felt this incredible, all the emotion that I had been stuffing down, my denial, I came out of that day, I went through the what ifs, what if that doctor had given me that TPA that day, and, you go, my life could have been so much different, but it wasn't, and he was right. I was blessed, and I was lucky. And it became very clear to me on that day that I had been taking this gift that I had been given for granted. So as I had thought, on the plane that I needed to start doing something for stroke, and now I was like, okay, I'm motivated. I'm going to go home and I'm going to do something good with this. Well, that night in my email inbox, when I checked my email, I had this generic email from the National Stroke Association that said, "We are putting together the first ever team to run the New York City Marathon this year. We have a group of we'd like 25 people to run to raise money for us. If you know anyone who might be interested, then please, contact us." And I literally looked up and I went, "God, no." No. I ran a mile on the beach. That's not 26.2. I can't do that. I'll go home, I'll volunteer, I'll put in a little time, don't make me run this marathon. So I tried to ignore it, and have you ever felt like, I'm sorry, I'm not an evangelist, and I'm not really comfortable with religion, so I apologize, but it's a piece of my story. I know it was God's mission for me to run that marathon, and it just felt like every time I'd go this way, he'd go, "Nope, here, I want you to run this." And I went, for a week I struggled, and I kept going, no, I'm not going to do this, and I keep getting pushed that way. And finally, when I went home and talked to my mother, who is the queen of do not rock the boat, don't upset the basket, and very protective of me, okay? So I said, "Mom, I have this crazy idea to run a New York City Marathon. I feel like I might need to do that, but it could kill me." She goes, "Lenice, you could die by getting hit by a bus if you walk out the door right now. Why not do it?" And I went, "Okay, God, you convinced me." You got Mom saying this? All right, so fine. I went, "Fine, I'll call." So I called the Stroke Association. I said, "I'm positive you have filled every position, that you don't need anyone else to run it, do you?" They said, "Well, we've had several people who have applied for the last couple of positions. Why don't you tell me your story?" So we start talking, and the lady on the other end said, "We would love to have you run." It's like, oh, because this is July. It's July, and the race it was November 30th, or October 30th. I had 3 months, and I had just run a few days on the beach. I went, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But I did what I set my mind to doing. I spent the first 6 weeks just trying to get some kind of aerobic base going. I'm not kidding when I said I could barely run a mile. My undergrad is in exercise science, so I had a good idea of what I needed to be doing, and I know my body pretty well, so I created my own training program. And I spent, like I said, that first 6 weeks just trying to get up to the point where I could run like 5 miles comfortably, okay? And once I did that, the last 6 weeks I spent adding long runs. So every week I would add 2 miles. My first long run was 10 miles. And I thought I was going to die after 10 miles. I went, oh, I have no idea how I'm ever going to make this. It's terrible. And so the next week, I added 2 miles, so I did a 12-mile long run. And then you go, oh, I made it to the 10 miles. It's always the last 2 that really get you. You're like, oh, how am I going to make it through this? But every week I would do that. Then next week I ran a 14-mile run, and the last 2 were the hardest. And I kept building up until about 3 weeks before the race when I tapered off. And I think when that was done, I had just done an 18-mile run. Had no idea what to expect and made a lot of mistakes along the way. But I got to the point where I was 2 weeks before the marathon, had done a 20-mile run, and made it through that. It was a miserable and horrible experience. And I was scared. I was scared about running. I knew I was not going to do a 26-mile run. I didn't know if I was going to be able to do those last 6 miles. They say adrenaline gets you through, but I had no idea what to expect. One of the side effects of my stroke, I get migraines. That vascular malformation also causes migraines. I don't always get migraine headaches. I'm one of the lucky ones that gets atypical, complicated migraines, and if weird things are going to happen, it seems to happen to me. My migraines can manifest in stroke-like symptoms. They can make my left leg not work, which in itself is stressful because now I don't know if it's another stroke happening or if it's a migraine. Well, 2 weeks before the marathon, I had a really bad, it turned out to be migraine episode, but I was in this hospital for almost 2 days before they could determine that's what the cause was. But now I'm sitting in this hospital room with my left leg from basically my knee down. I had no use of it. I'm like, God, you wanted me to run this. I've been training. I finally bought into this thing. I've been raising money and doing everything you asked me to do. Why do this to me now? You know, how am I supposed to run? What am I supposed to do? I was so angry. I was so confused and scared and determined. I was just still like, I want to finish that race. It took most of that 2 weeks for my leg would slowly get better and come back to the point where I could use it. I got off the plane in New York, and as soon as I hit the ground, just this sense of peace came over me. Like, I know I'm going to be able to do this. And marathon day was absolutely amazing and incredible. It was perfect weather. I ran the whole way, which I really just expected to finish. I wanted to finish before the street sweepers. They are at like a 16-minute mile pace, and like as long as I'm ahead of them, that's okay. If they're not cleaning me up off the pavement, I'll be happy. And I ran the whole way. It was amazing and incredible. I know that I did not do that just on my own. I know that God intentionally did put me in that hospital 2 weeks before. I said that, you know, if you believe in me and you follow my path, that I will give you what you need to get you there, that it is possible. So I crossed the finish line, never hit the wall, just really felt, it hurts, don't get me wrong, but I never felt like I needed to quit. I felt much better than I had in all of my training runs. And I crossed the line just feeling so amazing. It's the most addictive thing I have ever done in my life. I was ready to sign up to run it again the minute I crossed the finish line. I went, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm capable of doing this thing. I just finished it. It feels awesome. And I went, see, God, I did it. I did this for you now. And now you can leave me alone, right? I put my time in and it's done. And immediately I went, I know this is not going to be the end of it. The National Stroke Association ended up featuring me in an article in their magazine, Stroke Smart. And people from all over the country started contacting me, thinking that I had done this amazing thing. I just kept wanting to go, you need to talk to that guy on the beach. Because his story, really, to me, was the amazing one. And you might notice that I carry a couple of wristbands with me. But each one of them has come to me from some place and someone special. And when I look at them, I remember how I have it so much easier. You know, that I'm blessed to be able to walk and be able to run, that I really do feel like it's a blessing and a privilege to be able to do that. And I wanted to call attention to the fact that I am the exception. I am not the rule, that so many people suffer so much more, whether it's from stroke or cancer, or there are so many other people out there who are just unable to do what I've been able to do. So, you know, if I can raise money and help people in any way possible, that's a good thing, because that man on the beach shouldn't be forgotten. He can't stand up and advocate for himself now, and his life has dramatically changed. So the more that we can do to you know, keep ourselves healthy and help other people at the same time, that's a good thing. I would have run my 4th New York City Marathon this year had the hurricane not had a different idea for me, but it really has become a passion. I can honestly say I didn't start enjoying running until after the 2nd marathon. It just took an awful lot of time in doing it before. Now I don't feel right if I'm not able to run, if I'm not able to get that stress relief in. I try to do it in a healthy way, because I think that really running is an obsessive compulsive behavior in itself, and marathon running is really crazy. To do that many miles, it's hard on your body. So I only do one. That's it. It's my special one. It's the only one I do. And the rest of the time I just run, you know, more normal miles. I usually don't do much more than 5 or 6 miles at a time, but do it pretty consistently, and then hit training kind of hard before the marathon comes. So, does anyone have any questions at this point? Do you want to hear more about my training, or you want to hear what part? Training?
Like if we've never done that before, wanted to go do that, what would we do to prepare for a marathon?
Don't do it the way I did it. 3 months is not enough time. 6 months is probably a better goal, and then I would say if you have a good foundation to start 6 months of marathon training. There are some great resources online. I love Runner's World magazine, and they have training programs that are really cheap. I think it's like $30, and they basically will tell you every day what you need to do. But I started with, I personally do, this works for me. I like to do 2 days of running and then 1 day off, and kind of work in there. So I would do a shorter day and then a longer day, and then take a day off. A little bit shorter run and then add a little bit longer. And it's pretty simple, it's pretty basic. When I'm just running for a foundation, I like about 4.5 to 5.5 miles is about all I do. I never worry about my speed. I worry about being able to breathe and speak comfortably. I think one of the things that really has helped me in training is thinking about my breath. And I have a pattern when I run. I breathe in twice, 2 steps, and out 4. Some people are in 3 and out 3, or, you know, whatever works for you. But keeping a consistent breathing pattern helps keep the lactic acid buildup down. And when you're running at a pace that is comfortable and you can breathe consistently, then you're going to be able to go a little bit longer. You know? Most of us have the tendency to just go out and say, okay, I'm going to do this, and then you want to go full speed and, you know, be 15 again, and it just doesn't work that way. So I don't really focus on how fast I'm running, it's more how I feel. There's a couple of like GPS tracking programs that I really like using. I've used Endomondo, or there's a couple of others where it will actually tell you what your pace is, exactly how far you've run, I find those things to be very motivational. And if you're running for a specific race and training for it, knowing how many miles you've run is really important. So I've used those a lot. The other thing that I've used a lot during my training is both music and books on audio. Some people like to run without any music, some people like to run with music. I found, especially when I was doing the long training runs, that they get to be, running 20 miles, that's 4 hours, and that's way too much time to spend alone in my head, so I needed a book to get lost in. And that helped me a lot, so I would just stream books on audio through my phone. Most of my marathon pictures, you can see I have my phone in my hand. I carried it with me the whole way, and part of that is just knowing that I have 911 available there, if something happens. But I would stream books on audio through that, and that helped me run and increase my time. When I wanted to increase my pace, then I would use music. Because I don't know if any of you are like this, but if I'm running to music, I have to run at the same pace of the music. And if it's fast, I'm going fast. If it's slow, I'm going slow. I found with the books on audio, it's easier for me to keep a consistent pace and keep going for the longer stuff. So Stephen King and Christopher Moore, there's a lot of good authors that got me through. I can almost tell you which marathon. I can tell you an author for each marathon because I go through all of their books for the training. There's something else that I was just going to say. I think one of the things that I learned the hard way was how to feed your body properly. Because I ended up damaging my kidneys after the second marathon from being dehydrated. I got some I think it's called hyponatremia. Natremia, yes. When your electrolytes are out of balance from the amount of, I was just sweating out so much and not taking in enough electrolytes. And man, that messes you up. That is not a good feeling. Dehydration as well. I thought I was taking in enough fluids, but I drank an awful lot of, it was either water or iced tea that I drank. I didn't realize how much the iced tea was dehydrating me. So I've had to give up my love of iced tea. I drink Gatorade a lot now. That helped a lot, which when you start getting up into some of the higher miles, that makes a difference. Learning how to fuel my body. Now, everyone kept saying, use these little sports things, the goo blocks and they're terrible. Can anyone eat those? I couldn't, but this is what I had on me, and I'd carry those things with me, and I'd put that goo in my mouth, and I swear I'd run for 5 miles before I'd finally be able to swallow it. And then I would avoid taking them because it's a nasty experience. I think it was actually after marathon number 2. One of the great things about New York Marathon, there are 4 million people lined in the streets, and everyone is there for me. They're all cheering. Little kids are high-fiving you along the way. It is so motivational, and everyone has something to give you. Whether it's Kleenexes because you've got crud all over your face, or pieces of orange, or pieces of candy. And at some point, it hit me. I was like, these people are giving me candy, and that was good. I went, why don't I use this in my training? So I switched. I now carry chocolate with me. This little Hershey's Nuggets with pieces of nuts in them. And I found for me that works so much better. I also like the cocoa roasted almonds. I eat those before. I would carry some with me. That they're a great, easy way to get some protein. They stay with you. So those worked really well. I would set in my little bag that I would carry in my hand on my training runs, I'd have chocolate and grapes. The grapes are like, when you've been running for 14 miles and you put a little grape in your mouth, it is an explosion of water and fruity flavor. It's just, they are God's little blessing in one little package. So that's what I used. before and afterwards. And that's helped me a ton because I will eat chocolate. There's no problem with that going down. But that goo stuff was just absolutely nasty and disgusting. So I think really one of the best things you can do is do some research. You know, Runner's World is a great resource, but really listen to your body. You know, when you're sick, don't run. Take the time to let your body heal. You know, when you're hurting, there's usually a reason why. I'm really lucky I have the physical therapist that I use to learn to walk again. She's been one of my angels, and she's been really helpful for me when I have had issues come up to help me work through those. Whether it's, you know, I mentioned that my left foot is weaker than my right, and over time, it's caused my right leg is stronger than my left, and so it's caused my hips to do this just enough that it's caused my spine to twist just a little bit, and so I have some vertebrae that are degenerating in here, and she's been really helpful about, you know, exercises to kind of deal with that imbalance and get me on the road again. But ignoring aches and pains in your body is just not a great thing to do. You need to deal with it before it gets to be a huge problem. So yeah.
Are you going to run the marathon this year?
Yes. I officially signed up. They gave us the option to defer, to get a refund, to do it again. It's like, and I looked at that button. I'm like, okay, sign up to do this again. Because I do this every year. I'm like, oh, you finish, and then you're all excited about doing it again, and then training time comes, you know, and you do your first 10-mile run. Why did I sign up to do this again? Because it's lonely, and it's a commitment, and it takes hours and hours of time. You know, my boys are without me when I'm running, and they're, you know, I have a 17, 10, and 8-year-old. You know, they're relatively self-sufficient, but it's a commitment for them as well. You know, so but they're all supportive of me doing it. I think one of the side effects that I didn't anticipate when I signed up to run the marathon the first time really was, you know, I was doing it really just to raise some money and kind of put my time in and do what I need to do. I had no idea that it was going to change my life in the way that it has. And one of those ways was with my children. You know, I needed a handrail to go up and down steps. I don't anymore. My leg has gotten strong enough to the point that, you know, I could stand on my leg on its own now and be confident it's going to hold me up. I couldn't do that before. And that's changed their attitude about me. They see me as a much stronger woman, a healthier woman. They see me running and taking care of myself, and so they worry about me less. And that is just a huge blessing. That's something I couldn't have anticipated or thought about, but that's been one of the most important things to me. The other way that, and I don't necessarily think you need to run a marathon for this to happen, but running has given me a sense of confidence that nothing else has ever done. To make myself go and do it when there is no one else being your cheerleader, and to keep putting one step in front of the other when you really feel like quitting, but you cross that goal, whatever mileage that ends up being for you, when you cross that line, it is just such an amazing sense of accomplishment, and that's something that no one can take away from me. And there's so many times, in fact, people get tired of listening to me refer everything is about running a marathon. Like, well, but it's changed my life. You know, it pumps me up when I think about difficult periods, whether it's an emotional or physical stress that I'm going through. Like, I run a marathon. I can do this. You know, I know I'm capable of committing myself to something that is big, and I can make it through, and that really it is our minds my mind anyway, that limited me much more than my body did. You know, I used my body as an excuse for a long time that, you know, oh, this is wrong with me, or that's wrong, or this hurts, that aches, and it's a really good excuse. But I learned that with, you know, the commitment and dedication that I'm capable of doing way more than I give myself credit for, you know, and a piece of that is, you know, God giving me the path and the determination to do that, but it really has changed my life in many, many ways. So I sleep better at night, I deal with stress better, you know, I'm a better person all around. I'm a better mom, I'm a better friend, I'm a better person, not only because I run, but I really think that the stroke affected me, you know, in that way, that there's a silver lining in just about everything, you know, and for me, it's made me much more compassionate and dedicated, and I'm not always the best at this, but I think not sweating the small stuff. You know, when you face your own death, when you face, you know, the possibility that I may not be here to raise my children every day, you appreciate that the sun comes up and that you know, it's a beautiful thing, and the little things in life, and you slow down and start thinking about those things. So I am going to run again, God willing. We'll see that if Hurricane Sandy stays away this time, but yes. So,
Are there any other questions for Lenice?
Did you do anything about what drove you for the kinds of shoes that you run in? Did you go somewhere and get fitted?
I did. Yeah, I use Peak Performance. I just found that they are all runners, and they're extremely knowledgeable, and they actually looked at the way that I walked, and I walked up to the row of pretty shoes, and I went, oh, I like that one. And no, that one's not right for your foot, because I would have ended up in that, and I'm really thankful that I did go there. So they were really helpful. And you know, I run in a shoe that's a full size bigger than my normal shoe. You need that extra space, because I've lost just about every toenail. The first year, they were like, yeah, I need to run bigger. I'm like, no, it's fine. And like, you jam your toes into the end of your shoe 26 miles, and the toenails end up coming off. I'm like, okay, bigger shoes are fine. But, so they were a really helpful resource for me.
What did your physician say or think about you telling you were going to be running? Did they have concern about, you know, another stroke, or what you should do, or how you should have started? Because you were out in Florida, you weren't with your physician there, you know, when you started running.
It was kind of ironic, because I actually had an appointment with Dr. Fayed right after I got back from my annual checkup, and I'm still under care with him. And so I walked in, and he had already kind of had to deal with me in this sense. Is one of the things I didn't want to give up was skiing. I'd love to snow ski with my kids. And I figured out a way, so he didn't want me hitting my head. So I went, all right, if I ski with those poles that have skis on them so I don't fall over, can I go? He was like, oh, fine. Go. So I wore a helmet, and I used those things. I don't have to do that anymore, though. The marathon has strengthened my leg enough that I don't ski with those anymore. But so when I went in and said, Dr. Fayed, I've got this crazy idea about running a marathon, I really was probably more hoping that he would say, don't do it. Just like I did with my mom. I was looking for an excuse not to do it. And he goes, do it. Go for it. One of the just realities of what I deal with is we don't know what causes it. So, all we can do is best guess and, say don't take the chance on hitting my head and that kind of thing. I do need to be very careful about staying hydrated and making sure that, my fluid levels are good. But other than that, it's like, just go. But it does scare me when I go out and run, and especially marathon day. I'm like, please don't let this be the day, But I just keep telling myself, I know this was God's path for me, and it's about facing your fear and, you know, standing up and doing it anyway, and so he said, go for it.
Anybody else?
The hole in the heart, was it a PFO?
Yes.
Or what?
Yes.
And he didn't have any correlation with that and stroke? So when you found out what it really was, or?
Correct. Yeah. I had some weird heart arrhythmias and issues, and when they plugged that hole, it fixed that. So I was really happy that I did it. And you know, in the long run, it's a course of potential stroke that I don't worry about anymore. So my peace of mind, that's been a really good thing. But it just so happened with me that that wasn't the cause of it. I mean, the malformation that I have in itself is not horribly rare, but it's extremely rare that it bleeds. So they had seen that it was there. The doctors who had looked at it before didn't believe that you know, that could possibly be happening. So it took. I'm so thankful for Dr. Fayed and him, you know, really helping me. And you know, even though I can't prevent it, I can't stop anything from happening, it's such a comfort to know that I have him and I have this hospital. I've visited here several times, and I'm so thankful for this hospital. I'd love to work for you. I'm so thankful for all of you people that come here and do this. And we're probably running out of time, aren't we?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I just want to say I do run a support group here for stroke survivors, so and I just store that in the back of your head if you know anybody who you know, may need that at some point. I've found it a great way for me to deal with you know, those ongoing things that fellow stroke survivors are really good at supporting each other through. So. I left a card and some information about the support group. If any of you want to take that, if you want to contact me or have any other questions, feel free to do that.
Thank you, Lenice.